Anna here is a 28-year-old attorney. From the tumult of my childhood, a past I kept locked up even from those closest to me, my life now is a far cry. The ring of my phone broke the calm in my workplace. The show displayed an unfamiliar number, yet something about it felt eerily familiar. I hesitantly responded with a hand. "Anna speaking," I said, sounding a mix of caution and professionalism. The voice said, "Anna, it's your father," with a nervousness that did nothing to ease my growing anxiety. A cold passed through me. I had not heard that voice in more than 10 years, a voice that once represented love and protection, but now stood for misery and betrayal. "Why are you phoning me?" My angry words sliced through the quiet that followed his introduction. "I'm in financial problems, Anna. I need your help," he replied, his voice faltering a little. Though honest, his plea set off a burning of bitterness in me. "Your assistance." "Right now. You want me after all these years?" I answered, incredulity and resentment blending in my voice. "Indeed, if it weren't critical, I wouldn't ask. I'm truly in a problem," he said, desperation tipping into his voice. "You long ago quit being my father. You cannot just call me now and expect me to help," I said, my voice icy and uncompromising. The line stopped in thick quiet that seemed like an unbridgeable gap. "Anna, kindly, still your dad," he added, a weak attempt at rekindling a link long gone. The word dad seemed alien, nearly shocking. "Dad?" Years of buried rage and hurt found their way into my voice as I exclaimed, "You lost that title when you chose her over me." "You are the daughter of ours," I considered. "You thought wrong," I said, cutting him off in middle sentence. "You made your decision years ago. Today I have made mine." His voice carried a mix of desperation and begging. "Anna, I apologize. I only need just one favor." In my office, the word sorry seemed empty and useless. "Sorry doesn't alter the past." I hung up firmly and said, "I cannot help you." Love and joy abound throughout my early years before the age of 10, a monument to the great existence my parents and I led in our modest rented house. Our days were blessed with warmth and our evenings with dreams and stories thanks to my mother, a lighthouse of love and happiness. Once a light-hearted and kind man, my father would spend evenings teaching me little worldly lessons or playing games with me. Every day was an adventure and every night a pleasant dream in our house, which resembled a cocoon of contentment. But with my mother's sudden death, our happy life came to a sharp stop. Once echoing laughter and joy, the mansion became a silent cemetery of memories. I recall me strolling throughout the rooms, every nook a sharp reminder of her absence. Not only did I find the loss intolerable, but my father also lost the love of his life, but the intensity of his loss seemed to fade fast, which confused and disappointed me. In a few months he returned home with Marissa, a woman destined for major influence in our life. I remember the day he first brought her, a day marking the end of my beloved childhood. "Anna, this is Marissa. She will be staying with us," my father said one evening, his voice lacking the tenderness I was so used to. Looking up at her, I searched for a trace of friendliness or motherly warmth, but came nowhere. She was imposing, her eyes steely and exact. I felt a change in the air from the first moment, a change that drove an inexplicable terror within me. "Hello, Anna," Marissa responded, her voice fluid but devoid of any passion. Her grin seemed to conceal something dark under its surface, not to be consoling. The house felt different in the next days, as though the walls themselves were withdrawing from her presence. The happy recollections of the past appeared to dissipate, replaced by a residual anxiety that permeated every inch. I recall looking at Marissa in search of something positive or decent about her, but her every glance and motion appeared to be tinged with an implicit resentment. She was obviously here to create a new story, one in which I was an undesired participant, not to cover the gap my mother left. Couldn't help but feel as though her presence marked the start of something sinister as I watched her wander our once safe and joyful house. Her staring at me with eyes that seemed to conceal more than they exposed suggested poor future prospects. The days after Marissa arrived felt like waking from a dream I couldn't get clear from. Once filled with my mother's laughter and affection, the house seemed chilly and unwelcome. Marissa's presence shadows everything and makes even the most basic daily activities a sequence of challenges. My breakfast tasted somewhat salted one morning as I sat down. "Marissa, did you overdone the salt in this?" I inquired, my voice unsure. "Oh, did I? It has to have been a mistake. Just devour it, Anna. Don't be so finicky," she said, her tone contemptuous, perhaps sarcastic. The incidents were more regular and vicious. I recall discovering destroyed clothes during a laundry session. "Marissa, every one of my outfits has faded. What transpired?" "One day," I inquired, holding up my once favorite dress, now faded and unworkable. She looked at it, then shrugged apathetically. "Maybe the washing machine is acting up, or maybe it's time you stopped wearing such young clothes." Though I was frustrated, I knew arguing would only make matters worse. Feeling powerless, I looked to my father, expecting he would be able to see through her front. "Dad, Marissa is messing about with my stuff. She is usually nasty to me," I murmured one evening, my voice quivering with a mix of grief and rage. The way my father responded far from what I had hoped for. "Anna, your imagination is running wild. Marissa is making every effort to fit our family." "Stop messing about," he shouted sharply, his words cutting right through. I objected, "But Dad, it's the truth." But he wouldn't hear. "That's enough, Anna. I want no more of your charges," he said, his voice growing in fury. Every day was a fight, negotiating Marissa's resentment and my father's apathy. Once a haven, the house felt like a jail now. Spending more time in my room, I sought solace from the continuous tension in the air. Living in that house of horrors, I felt alienated and misinterpreted. Fear and worry replaced the comfort and contentment that before permeated those walls. Every day I yearned for the past, for the times when my mother's smile lit the whole room, a sharp contrast to the gloom that now permeated every corner. Living with Marissa became a daily struggle of survival and avoidance. Her contempt of me progressed from verbal barbs to actual violence. It began gently, a twist on my tummy or a pinch on my arm, always in areas readily hidden under my clothing. The suffering was acute, a nasty reminder of my powerlessness in her company. Always on her location in the home, I devised plans to avoid her. I would wait till she was busy or travel great distances to my room. Though I tried, there were occasions when she surprised me, and those times always brought some kind of hurt. One day, Marissa walked in, and for no apparent reason, gripped my arm firmly while I was silently reading in the living room. Her nails dug into my skin. I bit back any cry of protest, even though I hurt. She turned to face me with a chilly, triumphant smile, then left. Grandma observed my careful motions and the way I flinched when Marissa's voice rang over the house on one of her rare visits. "Anna, is everything all right at home?" Grandma asked with worried voice. My heart wanting to tell her the truth, I stared at her, but held back by fear and the need to shield her from concern. "Absolutely, Grandma, everything is good. Only a lot of homework," I said, forcing a grin for her. She looked uncertain but did not press on. Though I felt guilty about lying to her, I couldn't stand to consider upsetting her. I watched Marissa from the window that evening as Grandma went, her look one of gratification. She seemed to enjoy the authority she possessed over me, that she could harm me and get away with it. Her victorious appearance made it very evident that she was in charge. I was merely a powerless participant in her warped game. Feeling caught in an abuse and silent cycle, I withdrew to my room. Marissa's pinches and twists caused physical suffering that was tolerable compared to the emotional torment I experienced. School turned to become my haven, where I could momentarily flee the suffering of my personal life. Still, the shadows of my domestic conflicts started to leak through. Mrs. Thompson, my teacher, a gentle woman who always pushed her students, began to see changes in me. She softly touched my wrist one day as I turned in my homework, her eyes drawn to the bruises on my arm. "Anna, what occurred here?" "These seem like bruises," she replied, her voice tinged with sympathy. I drew back my arm fast, hiding the bruises under my sleeve. "Mrs. Thompson, nothing at all. I simply dropped while playing," I said, dodging her look. Mrs. Thompson did not seem persuaded. "Anna, you can let me know whether something seems off or whether someone is mistreating you. Speaking out is crucial," she advised, her eyes darting across mine, seeking the truth. I wanted to share with her everything about Marissa and how I lived under continual anxiety, but the words never would come. Rather, I started to smile under duress. "Really, Mrs. Thompson, I'm good. It was simply a dumb mistake." She looked at me carefully, then nodded gently. "All well, Anna, but keep in mind my door is always open. You're not alone," she murmured, smiling reassuringly. I nodded, lumps developing in my throat. Her compassion made it more challenging to keep up the front of everything was okay. Mrs. Thompson's comments kept coming back to me as I strolled home that day. I was both quite lonely from bearing my responsibilities alone and appreciative of her attention. The idea of coming clean about my situation at home was horrific. I worried about the fallout, what Marissa may do should she learn I had told someone. I was silent at supper that evening, immersed in contemplation over Mrs. Thompson's offer of assistance. Marissa became aware of my quiet. "Anna, why so quiet tonight? Cat caught your tongue," she asked with a sarcastic voice. I just shook my head and carried on eating, trying to make myself as tiny and invisible as I could. As I lay in bed after supper, the reality of my circumstances seemed more daunting than it had ever been. Mrs. Thompson's worries had taught me that people did care, but my silence was brought on by my fear of what truth-telling revealed. Every day I balanced my need to tell someone with my fear of Marissa's reprisals. Anxiety and dread for me permeated the day my teacher, Mrs. Thompson, chose to involve my father. Fidgety in the principal's office, my mind racing with anxiety about my father's response. When he did arrive, his face was austere, and his eyes revealed a mixture of contempt and shame. "What's this regarding Anna? Why am I being called to your school like this?" he demanded, his voice sharp as he moved in. Seeking some kind of support, I looked at Mrs. Thompson. I attempted to find my voice while swallowing deliberately hard. Mrs. Thompson saw. She saw the bruises. I mumbled under his weight. He interrupted before I could go on, clearly angry. "Bruises? Your topic is what? Are you once more fabricating stories?" Mrs. Thompson intervened, her voice forceful but understated. "Mr. Smith, Anna's general welfare worries me. Her arm's injuries seem not to be accidental. We have to talk about this." Anger made my father's face a shade darker. "At home, she is quite safe. Anna, are you misleading others about our family?" He turned straight toward me, clearly disappointed. The tears I had been stifling began to flow. "Dad, it's not lying. Marissa, she's been hurting me," I said, the truth at last rising. His answer was one of complete incredulity. "Marissa? That is ludicrous. She has been only friendly to you. I won't have you denigrating her with these charges." "But, Dad, the fact is this." Desperate for his belief in me, I shouted out. He got up suddenly, his tolerance fraying. "Not enough of this. Tell Mrs. Thompson you distorted everything." I turned to the teacher under orders and repeated his statements. She nodded back but spoke nothing. When he got home without saying anything further, he locked me in my room. Marissa's voice, slinking with phony worry, came through the door. "She's just seeking attention, I told you," she added. Feeling great loneliness and hopelessness, I sat on my bed, One person I considered I could always trust on had turned away from me. Once feeling like my personal refuge, the walls of my chamber suddenly seemed to be those of a jail. "What is this about, Anna? Why am I called to your school in this manner?" he ordered, his voice crisp as he moved in. I looked at Mrs. Thompson in search of some encouragement. Swallowing hard, I sought my voice. "Dad, Mrs. Thompson saw. She saw the bruises," I mumbled under the weight of his eyes on me. He interrupted, his wrath evident before I could go farther. "Bruised? You're talking about what? Are you once more creating stories?" Mrs. Thompson intervened, her voice cool but forceful. "Mr. Smith, Anna's general state worries me. Her arm's bruises don't seem like accident. We have to deal with this." Anger caused my father's features to darken somewhat. "She feels absolutely protected at home. Anna, are you misleading others about our family?" He turned directly toward me, clearly disappointed. I started to let the tears I had been suppressing flow. "It's not lying, Dad. Marissa, she's been hurting me," I said, the truth at last showing up. His response was one of complete incredulity. "Marissa, that is outrageous. She has been just friendly to you. I won't have you disparaging her with these charges." "But, Dad, it's the truth." Desperate for his belief in me, I yelled. He got up suddenly, his tolerance running thin. "Enough of this. Tell Mrs. Thompson you misrepresented everything." I turned to the teacher exactly as instructed and repeated his remarks. She nodded back but said nothing at all. When he got home, without saying anything, he locked me in my room. I could hear Marissa's voice dripping with phony worry coming through the door. "I told you she's just seeking attention," she added. Feeling a great degree of loneliness and hopelessness, I sat on my bed. One person I considered I could always rely on had turned away from me. Once like my personal refuge, the walls of my chamber now seemed like those of a prison. My granny showed up the following day. Though little in stature, her presence dominated the room. She faced my father with an unexpected strength. "John, I am bringing Anna along," she said resolutely. "She is not safe here." Surprised, my father tried to object. "Mom, you cannot just take her. She is my daughter." "Your daughter whom you failed to guard," she said harshly. I would not stand by and watch her suffer. Marissa sought to get in between. "She is only a young child creating stories. You cannot believe her over us." Grandma looked hard, then turned to Marissa. "When I see a fearful child, I know one. Anna is accompanying me. Should you try to stop me, I will send this information to the authorities." Realizing he was outmatched, my father stopped opposing further. Marissa's look changed from rebellious to defeated as I got ready. Walking out of the house with my grandma, I felt a weight off my shoulders. I felt safe for the first time in months. Though the automobile trip to Grandma's was silent, her presence was consoling. She turned to me once we were here and said, "You're secure now, Anna. You should not worry any more." I discovered the security and love lacking in my life in my grandmother's house. It was a refuge where I might recover and get back strong. Her loving abode and the frigidity of my father's house contrasted sharply. I felt like I could breathe once again, free from the dread and terror that had dogged me for the first time in a very long time. Since I moved in with my grandma from my father's place, years had gone by. Her house had been a haven, a kind and healing place. But time, as it does, progressed and carried with it still another wave of transformation. My dear grandmother died, leaving an emptiness that felt unfillable. My father and Marissa came up to the burial. Their expressions reflected a mix of forced grief and ill-disguised enthusiasm. They were obviously more concerned in what they could get from her death than in grieving her loss. Marissa lost no time gathering at my grandmother's house following the funeral. "Well, Anna, I guess right now you'll be looking for somewhere to reside. Your father owns this house and everything within it," she remarked, her voice slightly tinted with a barely hidden joy. Agreeing, my father looked about the room as though he already knew what to do with the house. I started to smile, a response they seemed to find confusing. "Actually, that's where you're wrong," I responded, surprised by my certainty. "What do you mean?" my father questioned, his face turning to one of perplexity. I inhaled deeply to appreciate the occasion. Grandma passed a will. Watching as their emotions shifted from uncertainty to horror, I said, "She bequeathed the house and a large sum of money to me." "Still, you are only a child. This is your father. Any bequest you get should be under my control." My father sputtered, his entitlement obvious. Marissa answered, her voice sharp, "Your father will manage your property until you come of age." Their responses were quite funny. "You hardly show any concern for me that would have you wishing me a happy birthday. 1 month ago I turned 18. Now, legally, I am an adult. I make my own judgments," I said, enjoying a look of insight flashing across their features. Shock gave way to fury, then to a kind of frantic pleading in my father's face. "Anna, you are incapable of doing this. Your family is here with us." I studied them, memories of my early years coming back. My voice firm, "You stopped being my family a long time ago." Marissa moved forward, her voice imploring now. "At least allow us to remain in the house. There's nowhere else we could go. We have not extended the lease on our residence." I nodded my head. "These days, this is my residence. You have to look somewhere else." Years of suffering and neglect seemed to weigh less on my shoulders as they went. Feeling closure, I stood in the house that was now mine and surrounded with memories of my grandmother's affection. Though the echoes of the past persisted, today I was free. With phone in hand, I sat there experiencing a range of emotions: anger, betrayal, and a sense of injustice. Still, behind all that there was a sense of strength, a memory of the resiliency that had got me through the worst of times.